Welcome to the series on architecting the persistence layer with the repository and unit of work design patterns. Over the course of 10 lessons, we're going to discuss two important architectural design patterns often used on the persistence layer, the repository and unit of work patterns. So the persistence layer, you'll recall, is delegated the responsibility of creating, reading, updating, and deleting the underlying data storage mechanisms such as a relational database, a document database, or some other data storage technology. These two design patterns solve a fundamental problem as to how best design the classes that will provide persistent services to the domain layer classes. Now, based on the fact that I'm spending so much time on these design patterns, you might get the impression that following these patterns is the only way to design a persistence layer for your application, and that's simply not the case. There are many other ways to design your classes, your methods, and so on. However, I would like to say that they do offer the embodiment of many of the ideals that we want in the persistence layer, ideals that I discussed in the architecture series. So why do we even need a series like this? Well, that's a great question. When I began the architecture series, I didn't think that I'd need to spend so much time talking about the nature of the persistence layer. However, after doing some research, I realized that there was a lot of disagreement, a lot of debate, a lot of misconception, a lot of misinformation, and the like about this topic. So, in fact, it took me a full week of reading every book I could find, every blog post, every forum post that I could find on the matter, and then synthesize those ideas together into a logical framework. So, to answer the question simply, the answers felt like they were spread across sheets of loose leaf notebook paper that were blowing across the streets of my neighborhood. Sure, the answers were everywhere around me, but they weren't collected together in a nice, neat format. So that's one of the goals that I have for this series. While the repository and unit of work design patterns do appear in authoritative books like Martin Fowler's Patterns of Enterprise Application Architecture, they're discussed more at a theoretical level. From a pragmatic practitioner perspective, regrettably, there are few good examples using C#, .NET, the Entity Framework, and so on. As I stated a few moments ago, good .NET examples do exist, however, they're discussed in a handful of disparate blog posts. It was quite an undertaking to digest everybody's writings and then come up with some cohesive thoughts on this matter. Furthermore, sometimes there seems to be an impedance mismatch between the theoretical writings of the authors that I often refer to, like Martin Fowler, Robert Martin, Eric Evans, and so on, that promote object-oriented programming, design patterns, domain-driven development, and so on the one hand, with the technology stack that we have as .NET developers, that we have at our disposal on the other hand. So most of the writers like Fowler and Martin and Evans and others are not .NET developers, or at least they don't claim .NET as their primary platform or even their platform of choice. Much of their thought process is shaped by the plethora of languages and platforms that they become familiar with through the years. So, what, should we not listen to them at all? Do they have any relevance in our world? Well, there's an old saying, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. In this context, I use that to express that there's a lot to learn from them and many good lessons to take away from their writing. So I think that they do have very valid points about writing flexible software that can withstand change. Now, if you watch the other series, you know that I try to adhere closely to what they have to say. However, that doesn't mean that it's easy to apply what they espouse using C# and the .NET platform. As I stated earlier, not everybody is in agreement about how to properly implement the repository pattern or whether we even need a repository pattern in the first place in our persistence layer. And there are several variations with wide-reaching implications. And so I'm going to discuss how to create a persistence layer using these patterns, and we'll discuss the ramifications of the popular variations on the implementations of those patterns. I'm going to show you everything that I found and my personal opinions on whether I like that particular idea or not. Again, these ideas are hotly debated, and no matter what I'm going to tell you, somebody would disagree with me. So this isn't an easy topic to talk about. So be forewarned, you're getting a decidedly opinionated conclusion, my conclusion, but along the way, I hope to provide a fair treatment of all your options, and then you can make choices on your own. So beginning in the next lesson, I'm going to talk about the repository pattern at a high level, and I'm going to follow it up with a variation that seems to be popular called the abstract repository or the generic repository. And so what will seem innocuous at first has some large implications, almost philosophical implications about why you're doing what you're doing. So we'll get started on this journey in the very next lesson. We'll see you there. Thank you.